There's a moment in relationships that nobody warns you about because it doesn't fit the romantic storyline. It's not the moment you meet. It's not the moment you fall. It's not the moment you choose each other in a dramatic scene. It's the moment things finally get steady. And instead of relief, you feel fear. Not fear like, I don't like them. Not fear like, something is wrong. More like a strange tightening in your chest when the relationship starts becoming real. When the texting becomes consistent. When the affection becomes reliable. When the plan starts sounding like a future instead of a weekend. When you can see the door to deeper intimacy and your body acts like that door is a cliff. You start getting restless at the exact time you thought you would feel safe. You start questioning things that didn't bother you before. You start noticing tiny flaws and treating them like prophecies. You start feeling the urge to pull away, to create distance, to pick a fight, to do something that turns the volume back up, because quiet love can feel like standing in a room where you can hear your own heartbeat again. And the question that haunts you isn't just, do I love them? It's, why am I like this when things are finally good? So let me ask the question that changes the entire interpretation. What if love feels scary when it gets real, because you're not in a relationship problem at all? What if you're standing in a threshold, an in-between passage, where the old version of you can't keep living the old patterns, but the new version of you hasn't fully learned how to trust peace yet? If you've lived this, you know how confusing it is, because it makes you feel ungrateful for the very thing you prayed for. You wanted someone consistent, and now that they're consistent, your nervous system keeps scanning for the catch. You wanted emotional safety, and now that it's here, you feel exposed, like you don't know what to do without the chaos to justify your guard. You might catch yourself thinking things you don't even agree with. This is too good to be true. They're going to change. I'm going to get trapped. I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to disappoint them. And then I'll be abandoned. Or the opposite. I'm going to outgrow this. And then I'll be the villain. Sometimes it turns into overthinking. You reread texts for tone. You watch their facial expressions like you're decoding weather. You compare their affection today to their affection last month like it's an audit. You keep looking for certainty, but certainty refuses to arrive because you're not actually searching for information about them. You're searching for permission to relax. And when you can't find that permission, you start considering the escape routes. You start telling yourself you need space. You start fantasizing about being alone. You start focusing on an ex or a crush or a new possibility. Not because that person is better, but because the idea of new feels safer than the reality of deep. Because deep love asks for something that shallow love never demands. It asks you to be seen without armor. It asks you to stay when your nervous system wants to run. It asks you to stop confusing intensity with truth. And if your history trained you to equate love with instability, then stability can feel like a threat because it removes the familiar role you used to play to survive connection. This is why people sabotage the relationship they said they wanted. Not because they're evil, because the body doesn't call it sabotage. The body calls it protection. There's a deeper pattern under this that most people never name, because naming it would require a new kind of honesty. Sometimes your fear isn't about them. It's about the version of you that would have to exist if you actually let this be real. If you accept consistency, you can't keep living as the one who's always bracing. If you accept care, you can't keep earning love through overgiving. If you accept stability, you can't keep using chaos as the reason you never fully committed. If you accept intimacy, you can't keep hiding behind independence as a shield. That's what makes this moment so pressurized. It's not only a relationship deepening, it's an identity crossing. And identity crossings happen in a specific kind of time. Time that doesn't look like progress while you're inside it. Time that feels like uncertainty, restlessness, and doubt, even when the outside looks fine. Time that squeezes old patterns until they either evolve or break. Temporal threshold cycles is the codex that names this. It's a lens for the in-between phase, the corridor between who you were and who you're becoming. In relationships, that corridor often appears exactly when the relationship starts becoming a place you could actually build. Your old defenses realize they might not be needed, and instead of celebrating, they panic. They've been running your life for so long that the idea of retiring feels like death. So they create problems. They create doubts. They create urgency. They whisper escape routes. They try to drag you back into familiar emotional weather because familiar feels safer than unknown. Even when the unknown is healthier. This is why the relationship can feel scary when it gets real. You're not only choosing a person, you're choosing a new rhythm. And your nervous system, which learned love in the language of unpredictability, is learning a new dialect. So the goal isn't to shame yourself for being afraid. The goal is to recognize what kind of moment you're in. Because when you can name the threshold, you stop treating your fear like a prophecy. You start treating it like a passage. Threshold cycles are ancient because humans have always known the middle is where transformation happens. In mythic stories across cultures, change doesn't happen in the beginning. The beginning is departure. The change happens in the corridor, the wilderness, the desert, the long road, the dark night, where the old identity can't keep operating, but the new identity hasn't stabilized yet. That middle is never portrayed as comfortable, and it's never portrayed as meaningless. It's portrayed as the mechanism. Initiation rites carried the same architecture in lived form. A person was taken from the familiar, placed into liminal space, stripped of old roles, tested by uncertainty, and returned with a new identity. The liminal phase wasn't a detour. It was the passage itself. In ancient timing philosophies, there was an understanding that not all time is productive time. Some time is compressive time. Some time is reshaping time. Some time is the slow reordering that makes the next stage possible. Relationships have these corridors too, even if nobody calls them sacred. You can see it when a couple moves from chemistry into partnership. In the beginning, everything is vivid. The nervous system is lit up. The future is undefined enough to feel exciting. Then the relationship steadies. Plans become real. Decisions carry weight. Suddenly, one or both people start feeling strange. They pick fights about small things. They become nitpicky. They start talking about losing the spark. Often, it's not the spark that's gone, it's the threshold arriving. The relationship is moving from novelty into reality, and reality asks for a different kind of intimacy than novelty does. You can see it when you leave a chaotic relationship and enter a healthy one. The healthy person doesn't trigger your adrenaline the way the old dynamic did. They don't disappear and return to create intensity. They don't keep you guessing. And at first, it feels peaceful. Then it starts feeling boring or suspicious, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's the threshold again. Your body is detoxing from intensity, and detox feels like restlessness before it feels like calm. You can see it after a major repair. A relationship survives a rupture, betrayal, emotional distance, a season of disconnection, and then you do the work. You talk, you rebuild, you choose each other again. The relationship becomes steadier, and that's when fear can spike. Not because the repair failed, but because the new version of the relationship is unfamiliar. The body knows how to survive dysfunction. It doesn't automatically know how to live in restored trust. So the threshold appears as anxiety, as testing, as hypervigilance, as the urge to ask the same question again and again. Are we really okay? You can even see it culturally in how modern dating trains people to avoid thresholds. Endless options make leaving feel easier than crossing. The moment the relationship requires patience, depth, repair, and real commitment, the culture offers a clean escape. Swipe, reset, start over. Starting over feels like control. Crossing feels like surrender. But surrender is exactly what thresholds demand. The surrender of the old identity that survived by keeping one foot out the door. This is why you feel what you feel now. Because the relationship is asking you to cross into a deeper kind of love, and your old patterns are screaming like they're being murdered, when they're really being retired. That's what a threshold is. It's fear that doesn't mean stop. It's fear that means you're close. So what do you do when you recognize the moment instead of reacting to it? You start by separating fear from information. Fear is loud, but it isn't always wise. In a threshold, fear often speaks in absolutes. Leave now. End it. Run. Protect yourself. Don't be stupid. Information sounds calmer. Information says, I feel exposed. I feel unfamiliar. I feel like I'm losing an old role. I feel like stability is new to my body. When you translate fear into information, you stop letting it drive. Then you slow the pace without sabotaging the bond. Thresholds don't require you to force closeness or force distance. They require you to honor timing. This can look like smaller commitments instead of dramatic declarations. It can look like choosing one intentional night together instead of demanding that the entire relationship feel perfect again. It can look like letting the future be discussed gently, in pieces, so the nervous system can integrate it. You also stop testing love to prove it's real. Many people, unconsciously, create conflict to see if the person will stay. The test is a way of making fear external, so it feels justified. But tests damage trust. If you feel the urge to test, name the urge as a threshold symptom. It means you want reassurance, not war. Ask for reassurance cleanly, without creating chaos as the price. Communication becomes different here too. Instead of, "I don't know if this is working," you try a truer sentence. "I notice I get scared when things feel stable. I don't want to punish you for that. I want to learn how to stay." That kind of honesty doesn't demand that your partner fix you. It invites them into the reality without making them the villain. And if your nervous system is activated, give it signals of safety that aren't dependent on the relationship being perfect. Sleep that's consistent, less doom scrolling, more movement that discharges tension, fewer stimulants that amplify anxiety, more quiet moments that teach your body it can be okay without chaos. The relationship isn't the only place regulation happens, but regulation makes the relationship possible. Finally, choose one act of devotion that is not performance, not a grand gesture. Something small that tells your body, we don't have to run to be safe. It might be staying in the conversation a little longer without fleeing. It might be letting silence exist without interpreting it as abandonment. It might be receiving care without deflecting. It might be allowing a plan to be real without immediately imagining how it could fail. These are threshold behaviors. They're not dramatic. They're mature. And maturity is what turns love from a feeling into a place you can live. When you move through this, the transformation doesn't arrive as a sudden personality change. It arrives as a different inner climate. Before, stability triggered panic. You scanned for flaws, searched for exits, and treated your fear like proof something was wrong. You either clung and demanded reassurance, or you withdrew and called it independence. You lived braced, and your relationships paid the cost of your unhealed thresholds. After, you begin to feel calm in places that used to scare you. You feel trust growing, not because you're certain, but because you stop obeying fear as if it's truth. You feel clarity returning because you can tell the difference between a real red flag and a threshold tremor. You feel self-respect deepening because you stop using sabotage as a coping strategy, and you start choosing honesty over performance. And the most surprising part is how love begins to feel safer without becoming smaller. You don't have to shrink your needs to avoid conflict, and you don't have to create conflict to feel alive. You learn that peace isn't boredom. Peace is capacity. Peace is a nervous system that isn't being chased. Transformation is internal first. The relationship becomes steadier as your body learns that real love doesn't require chaos to be true. It requires presence. And presence is a skill you build by crossing thresholds instead of running from them. If you're honest, what part of things getting real triggers you most? Consistency, commitment, being seen, planning the future, or receiving care? And what do you usually do when that threshold fear rises? What would it look like to cross this passage without testing love or abandoning yourself? When love becomes safe, the old survival self will call it danger, because chaos was never passion, it was familiarity. And the threshold is where you stop confusing familiar pain with real intimacy. If this episode named your season, Share in the comments what gets real means for you right now and what your fear tries to make you do. Subscribe if you want more Prophecy Pulse episodes that translate relationship confusion into pattern recognition, so you can build love that deepens without you disappearing.